To give you the details regarding from business, from the news stories. And now we start off from art is a widespread language that dates back thousands of years ago, where mankind told stories through pictures drawn on cave walls. Through the ages, artists have conveyed history through sketches, paintings, construction, and sculptures. Uganda aims at both local and international market for its handcrafts. During an interview with Smart 24 TV, Richard Musasizi, aka Y Atabanton, says that art and craft is a profitable business for any person to invest, provided that one runs his craft stably and time management investment inclusive. Richard is a musician but spends most of his time in art and crafting. This and more, as Andrew Barije reports.
Art is a widespread language that dates back thousands of years ago, where mankind told stories through pictures drawn on cave walls. Through the ages, artists have conveyed history through sketches, paintings, construction, and sculptures. Uganda aims at both local and international market for its handcrafts. Uganda's handcraft trade is largely informal market with an inconsistent market access, entry and penetration approaches, and inadequate market distribution networks. Richard Musasizi, a local musician commonly known as Y Atabanton, is a major participant in the art industry. He says it is a profitable venture for any person to invest, provided that one brands his craft stably and time investment inclusive.
Arts is better for you if you're there, if you can wise up and do this thing. The in-man there, but you have to give it time. And the way you're branding yourself is good. And the way you're doing your things, like you have to be smart in your works. Yeah? If you do those things, my brother, I'm telling you, the future is soon bright and better for you.
However, Richard also expressed concern over the challenges faced by the art industry in Uganda, where he emphasizes lack of enough capital, high branding costs, and also current low customer base. As a result, he has called upon the government of Uganda to intervene and give a helping hand to local arts to enable the development of the sector.
By the way, when it comes to challenges, we have like that challenge of a capital stuff, branding stuff, and the customer stuff. Because like in these days, things are not going well, my brother, I'm telling you. So basically, let's pray for God. In future, we're gonna do better, but things are not going well right now, but art's no lie. I beg the government to support the works of our arts, because this arts, what we're doing, is much better than the one you think is better. Yeah, please, I'm begging the entire government to support in the arts of our black people, Ugandan people.
Art and craft has a wide clientele in Uganda for both locals and the foreigners, as it offers potential for preservation of culture, since many people buy the art pieces because of the origin and culture heritage. However, marketing arts and crafts has always been a big question, as many felt these two are majorly for the foreigners and tourists who come to visit Uganda. There is considerable market for art and craft products among international visitors. Craft makers work beyond manufacturing, exposing and selling their products, but also work hand in hand with other creative industries where they can put their craft knowledge to market.
Later on the same issue, we're going to be having a fine artist in Uganda to discuss about the same art and craft the art and craft industry on the show. We're going to try to understand how is the business, where are the customers, and is the money coming through. So on the same incident still. But away from that, let's move on to the next story. Seatini, Uganda, Transparency International Kenya, and partners with support from Oxfam and Diaconia have organized a regional meeting on domestic revenue mobilization in the East African Community region. The overall goal of the project is to influence the formulation of equitable and inclusive revenue mobilization and accountability policies at national and the East African community levels. Let's have more of the details. Seatini, Uganda, Transparency International Kenya, and partners with support from Oxfam and Diaconia have organized a regional meeting on domestic revenue mobilization in the East African Community region. The meeting will provide a platform for stakeholders to share their work on domestic revenue mobilization, identify areas of synergy, and come up with strategies on how stakeholders can build better on the various initiatives in 2022. There are hopes that by the end of the conference, stakeholders will have a common position on tax harmonization and prudent debt management in the East African Community region, a draft resolutions on tax harmonization in the East African region, and a clear plan for joint civil society organization advocacy on equitable domestic revenue mobilization in the East African Community during the year 2022. Henry Mbazira, the Executive Director of Water Governance Institute, says that most of the East African countries are indebted, but the challenge has been on how the money borrowed is utilized.
Discussing with our regional partners, ESC partners, discussing issues of taxation in the region. And one of the things that is coming out is that most, or if not all, East African countries are bedeviled by debt. And that debt is becoming, most of the countries have gone beyond their original debt to GDP ratio targets. And so they are now sanitizing debt by saying that it is not the amount of debt that you take, but is more about the amount of how you use that debt to either trigger growth or, support, provide services and trigger economic growth. However, we think that that is not entirely very true, because we have seen situations where debt has been collected or received from outside and used for recurrent expenditure. There is nothing wrong with borrowing money. The question is, what do you use that money for? If you are going to borrow money to finance recurrent expenditure or administrative expenses, that money that you have brought will not definitely trigger the kind of debate, growth that we want. If you're going to borrow money and it does not support investment in the private sector, support in your local investors to grow, to access cheap capital, that debt is not, you won't get a return to investment, and return to borrowing, if I can use that word. The value for the money that you'll have borrowed will not be realized to the kind of extent that one would have expected. So, and that's why for me, in principle, I have been trying to advocate for what I call domestic direct investment, instead of focusing so much on foreign direct investment.
However, Mbazira believes that governments need to build internal capacity as part of the domestic resource mobilization strategy and should allow the local investors to have the lion's share in order to have more money staying in the economy, and this will trigger its growth.
I've been entrapped in the issue of relying on foreign money to grow. But when I look at examples in Asia, majority of them, actually the Malaysia, Singapore and the rest, much of their development was triggered by internal capacity. And so we need to build our internal capacity in terms of, as part of our domestic resource mobilization strategy. And secondly, it is okay to have foreign companies investing in the country because they bring in capital, but the proportion of investors that are investing from outside multinational corporations to in relation to the ones who are local.
Leonard Wanyama, a coordinator of the East African Tax and Governance Network, notes that debt has created hindrance to understanding the principles of tax justice, and this has led to unfair tax policies which hamper the expenditure during the budget allocation.
We would say that process, or any public finance process, needs to have 5 elements. It needs to be participatory, it needs to ensure accountability, it needs to ensure that there is non-discrimination, and it also needs to ensure that there is empowerment and following the rule of law. So essentially, when we think of what debt is doing to the East Africa region, it is somehow curtailing these 5 principles, which we look at as human rights-based principles in understanding tax justice and public finance management. So essentially, what we realize is that with this happening, particularly if you think of taxes as the means for self-sufficiency and therefore empowered and improved domestic revenue mobilization. Essentially what happens then is that we find with poor tax policy or with massive tax loopholes, you have a situation where you have harmful tax practices that are existent, you have unfair tax policy, and then further, when you continue down the chain of public finance management, the budget cycle gets hampered. So if the problem starts at revenue collection, then you'll have a problem at revenue allocation, then you'll also have a problem at expenditure, because all these activities, corruption and whatnot, are already fed into the process. And so essentially you get squeezed at the very beginning to the end.
Wanyama adds that governments are signing tax treaties and this will improve business and investment within the East African region, and therefore would want the region to have double tax agreement harmonizes the tax environment on the East African bloc.
Tax harmonization in a very specific context of double taxation agreements. So these are treaties that governments are signing with the other entities. So for instance, Kenya has about 15 tax treaties that it has enforced for its own sake, and the other East African countries also have their own double taxation treaties. So the point where they want to harmonize is in coming up with a regional double taxation treaty where they all signed up. But this hasn't happened because a number of the members haven't done that. But in doing that, then we have a way of improving investments in the region. We have a way of promoting business within the region vis-a-vis other entities across the globe. But it also kind of sets a level playing field in the region so that when investment comes in, there is an opportunity all round on an equal playing field for others. So essentially, we would like to champion to have kind of a common regional DTA or double taxation agreement or double taxation treaty that kind of puts a level playing field for the region and kind of harmonizes the tax environment and the space for investment that comes into the East Africa.
Seatini, Uganda, with support from Diaconia, is implementing a project on promoting equitable and inclusive revenue mobilization and accountability policies at national and East African community levels. This forum on domestic revenue mobilization officially kicked off on 7th December and will run till the 9th of December, focusing among others on tax, debt extractives and related physical. All right, and back to it as we are rolling. Now, when you look at some of the East African countries have greatly been indebted, and the reason as why most of them have been indebted is because of the fact that COVID and what have you. But most of the civil society organization have called for a better for domestic revenue mobilization, which will actually help the government implement better taxation policies that will also help out the local investors, plus the people, as well as boosting the economies on the East African community bloc. And that is one of the reasons as to why Seatini, Uganda, Transparency International Kenya, and partners with support from Oxfam have set out this particular project. And the forum slated to run till the 9th of December, focusing on, among others, tax, debt, the debt extractives and related physical issues. And away from that, let's move on to the other business story. As the Uganda National Bureau of Standards, together with the National Environment Management Authority, has again launched war against usage of boveras below 30 microns. Speaking to journalists at the Uganda Media Center, they say that this ban will not be undermined, adding that you either use the kavera and face the law or not. Pedison Mobere has more.
With big passes, they want a bigger kavera, this green one, flat bags. These are commonly used for...
The Uganda National Bureau of Standards, together with the National Environment Management Authority, NEMA, has again launched war against the usage of boveras below 30 microns. According to NEMA and UNBS, manufacturers have continued to delay the enforcement of plastic ban in the country, but there is a renewed commitment to enforce it through joint operations.
I guess each of you, every time you go home, they say you go with a Kavera. Regulation and the standard provides that no person, company, or industry or trader shall manufacture, import, or stockpile, trade, or distribute for local use plastic carry bags which are in contravention of the standard. So that's why we are saying that these carry bags, the Kavera, that do not meet the specification of the standards are not allowed by anybody to be imported into the country, to be manufactured, distributed, or retailed, or sold in any retail outlet. So that is prohibited, and therefore we are going to start enforcing or strengthen enforcement, because we have already been enforcing this, as I told you. Through our enforcement, we're able to seize up to 133 metric tons, but want to make sure that we strengthen this enforcement and make sure that all non-compliant carry bags are out of the market.
As my brother, the executive director of Uganda National Bureau of Standards, has said, the war against single-use plastics is back. We are back to tell Ugandans about the dangers of using single-use plastics. My colleague from UNBS has already indicated the regulations, the standards, the prohibitions within the law, which I will not repeat. I will focus myself on the dangers of single-use plastics. Why should Ugandans shun Kavera? That's where I will focus. One, we all know that our waste disposal mechanisms are insufficient. They are insufficient. And we know that single-use plastics accounts for 40% of plastics produced every year. So that's a very big percentage of the plastics. And as we all know, we use that Kavera for a few minutes to hours, but the impact it creates on the environment lasts for eternity. Plastic Kaveras, or single-use plastics as you know them, can take up to 20 years to biodegrade, the smaller one. But plastics generally can actually take up to 1,000 years to biodegrade from environment. You see, you've used it for just a minute, but the impact you've created on nature is 1,000 years to clean up. So that's how bad the situation can be.
Given the mandate of the two institutions, UNBS and NEMA will be collaborating in undertaking joint activities, especially enforcement of compliance to these standards on the market, to make sure that all the flat and the plastic carry bags which do not comply with the standards are out of the market. So our enforcement will be targeting the manufacturers, the importers, the distributors, and including prosecution of some of these persons who do not comply with the requirements of the standards.
To date, 45 factories have been inspected, 21 factories of which were found to be non-compliant and suspended from production and required to implement corrective actions before resumption of production. The majority of the factories were concentrated in Kampala, Wakiso, and Mukono, as well as Jinja.
The stick, like I said, is 7 years, up to 7 years imprisonment, or a fine of 5,000 currency points. 5,000 currency points. A currency point is 20,000. So you can do the simple mathematics. That's the stick as per the law. But also, UNBS can suspend production, can close the factory. So those are also sticks. But you can also be ordered to clean up the mess you've created as additional penalty under what you have already indicated as polluter pays principle. The reason the Kavera is required to be labeled is because of that, is attribution of responsibility. because the law requires that the producer has the responsibility to remove whatever has gone into nature for recycling and reuse. So the responsibility is not on government, it is not on KCCA or other urban authorities. The responsibility to collect the Kavera waste lies on the producer of the Kavera, the manufacturer. And that's why we require labeling for traceability.
Waste from the plastic bags poses serious environmental danger to human and animal life. If plastic bags are not properly disposed, they can impact the environment by causing stormwater drain backlogs.
The ordinary court, we have our special court where we can take those who do not comply. So again, we need to make sure that people comply so that we avoid penalties and the sanctions, including the litigation. Again, you will be seeing us soon. We have been working, as we have told you. Please don't get tired of putting the headlines that NEMA and UNBS to hit hard. So please continue doing that, because that is what we are intending to do. And again, you will be keeping close watch over our enforcement activities beginning soon, as the ED has mentioned.
It is very unfortunate that although the plastic bags have been seen to have reduced agricultural production worldwide, there has been a little significant awareness raising to undertake proper, effective, concrete proactive action. Indeed, few serious scientific investigations have been made by international organizations and the international community to reduce the ever-increasing consumption of the plastic bags. Pedson Mumbere, Smart 24.
Although plastic bags have been seen to have reduced agricultural production worldwide, there has been little significant awareness raising to undertake proper, effective and concrete proactive action. Indeed, a few serious scientific investigations have been made by international organizations and the international community to reduce the ever-increasing consumption of plastic bags. Okay, lastly, from our news hour, the Criminal Investigation Directorate has called for the enactment of Witness Protection Law. The spokesperson of the Criminal Investigation Directorate, ASP Twine Charles, while addressing the press, said that the victims and witnesses who provide testimony against crime perpetrators, who in most cases are powerful and influential in society, need to be assured of safety and security and should not suffer repercussions for their participation in judicial or non-judicial accountability proceedings. Let's have more of the details.
The concept of witness protection essentially seeks to ensure that victims and witnesses cooperating with accountability mechanism in judicial or non-judicial setting are ably protected and facilitated to the greatest extent possible. This is premised on the understanding that assurance for safety of such victims and witnesses are fundamental.
Make any statement regarding the bargain?
Not really a statement, but just to inform you that you have been consulted and informed about the process happening.
The Criminal Investigation Directorate has therefore called for the enactment of the Witness Protection Law. The spokesperson of the Criminal Investigation Directorate, ASP Twine Charles, while addressing the press, said that the victims and witnesses who provide testimony against crime perpetrators, who in most cases are powerful and influential in the society, need to be assured of safety and security and should not suffer repercussions of their participation in judicial or non-judicial accountability proceedings.
To appeal to the power that be to fast-track the issue of witness protection law. We don't have the witness protection in Uganda, and it is a serious impediment in our struggle to fight corruption. For example, whereas we have the law that calls for interdiction of a person that has been in conflict with the law, the interdiction only lasts for 6 months. Now, look at a situation where somebody will be probably arrested and prosecuted, and the prosecution process takes like a year or two. After 6 months, the suspect will be in office. So assuming one of the witnesses is a subordinate, you know, it looks really funny that during trial, a subordinate can ask permission from the boss who is the suspect to go and testify against him. So we want the law to be enacted expeditiously, and we call upon different stakeholders. And there are so many people who speak good English. They drive very posh cars. They have state-of-art offices. And they are speaking against corruption, but they are not acting. The time is now. The government must be engaged to ensure that the law the law on witness protection is made.
Witness protection is a protection for a threatened witness in the justice system during judicial proceedings, which may be an investigation, trial, inquiry, or proceedings of civil nature, usually by the police. Twine said that if this is not worked upon, it will antagonize the fight against corruption in the country.
A law that protects the whistleblowers, but whistleblowers may choose not to be compared as witnesses. A whistleblower may not be compared, but we have people who are competent and comparable witnesses, and inevitably must come and testify. But testifying against your boss may either cause your transfer, may cause an unfair reprimand, which we think really is an impediment in our struggle in the fight against corruption. Since the effects of corruption are adverse and devastating, let us all join hands in our respective capacity and join corruption against using our viable and legitimate frameworks. Remember, injustice anywhere is injustice everywhere.
While a witness may require protection until the conclusion of the proceedings, corruption in Uganda is widespread and is seen as one of the greatest obstacles to the country's economic development, as well as to the provision of quality public service.
You'll call the Honorable Minister Ogwang is moving across the country. And one of the glaring cases we've got in Kweni, in the CP sub-region, is that we have found out a project which was launched in 2012 for water, and the water was switched on a day before the Honorable Minister reached there with our team. 9 years. And the contract was for 2 years. Now, that means that the members of public, the citizens, were not aware, because they ought to have reported this. But what is more of a paradox is that the politicians, the local council leaders are aware of this, but they are part of the conduit. They are part of the syndicate. We have found out in the same region that there is a school that costed around 500 million, which has been budgeted every year. Every year they budget for this school, they pay and account. Then the next year they budget for the same school, and it has been budgeted 7 times. What does that one mean? Members of public are not in the know. So as police, in liaisons with so many other agencies, especially you, the media, we are going to support spontaneously some projects, and we really understand them and we share.
The Ugandan government has acknowledged that corruption is one of the main challenges faced in the country, but recent developments have raised questions on the government's political will to address it. Several reforms, laws, and new institutions to fight corruption have been established. However, in spite of recent investigation and corruption trials, an effective enforcement of the law in place is still lacking. Bedson Mumbere, Smart 24 TV.
And away from that, meanwhile, after the break, I do have a guest that we're going to be discussing the fine art industry, like I said earlier. So stick around with Mark Means Business. That is all we've had for you from the news hour. And be the first to know, like we say, the commodity prices, the trending business stories. Here is the source, SMB. Mine is to drive your business. I'll be right back.